The next guest, Sweden is actually the only market they should be in. We have the most beautiful people in the world. So you'll meet me at the bar crawl. I'm not on Tinder, busy. Anyway, but a fantastic conversation coming up. True rock star, deserves all your power and your greetings. He's being interviewed by a fantastic lady, Kathleen Chikowski at Forbes. So with all the power and might in your true rock star greeting, get up on your feet and welcome Sean Rad of Tinder.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Sean, it's great
You're so
to chat
far
with
away.
you. I know, the distance between us. So it's been almost 5 years now since you founded Tinder.
Yep.
And the app has 50 million active users, and it's facilitated more than 20 billion matches. And now you're the chairman of Tinder. You recently shifted from the CEO role, and you're also the chairman of Swipe Ventures,
Yep.
Tinder's M&A branch.
Yep.
Could you kick off by walking us through the roles that you've had at Tinder so far and explaining kind of your recent transition?
Yeah, so I became CEO again about 2 years ago. And when I came back in the role, I really had two things that I wanted to accomplish. One was make sure that we had a global footprint, a team that was able to think globally. What's unique about Tinder is we launched and kind of exploded all over the map day one. Most companies sort of build the foundation, the infrastructure, market, and then get customers. We had customers in every market in the world in over 196 countries and had to work backwards and build a foundation in order to think globally and sustain that. And we did that. The last 12 months, I think, was a great growth experience for the company. And also make sure that we have the income and the funding to sustain our long-term ambitions. And both of those things we're doing great on both fronts. So a few months ago, I decided to grow the company in a different way, and I'm still very involved in Tinder. I'm still the chairman of Tinder, but I strongly believe in acquisition as an avenue to grow the company because we're still a small team. We're about 250 people, but we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us, and the immediate team is really focused on the 1 year, the 2 year goals that we have, and there's a whole backlog of things to be built. And I sort of wanted to go focus freely on the next 5 year goal. And the best way to empower us in 5 years and to build the infrastructure for that is, I believe, is partially through acquisition. We also have a significant amount of capital to invest, which is fantastic. So sort of now wearing two hats, working on Tinder, but also working on Swipe Ventures.
And could you lay out for us how you see Tinder's 5 year goal and vision, and then how you see the very long-term vision for Tinder?
So I sort of, I think our goal in the next 5 years is, to get every single person on, or everyone who is single, on Tinder. And it's a massive market. It's bigger than people think. There's over 600 million single people on smartphones right now. And Tinder's the leader in the space, and in order to remain the leader, we need to continuously innovate. So I think in 5 years, I hope that we've utilized some of our scale. We are by far the largest, and some of our innovation and creativity to create the next great evolution in how people meet. I think AI is going to be an important enabler of that, not. A lot of people talk about AI as the product or the value proposition. AI is not a value proposition. It's an enabler. It can empower new value propositions. And I think a lot about how we can use AI to sort of transform dating in a 5 years' time.
And what could that experience look like when you think about infusing AI into the app more deeply?
Great question. I have a crazy sort of well, maybe not so crazy. I think in 5 years, what right now we're all like inundated with options. You open your phone and you have so much noise coming at you that I think the challenge now is filtering through that noise. And relevance is sort of a need for user experiences these days. I think in 5 years' time, we're going to interact with our devices differently. Instead of scrolling, searching, swiping, I think these devices will be intelligent enough to just give you the answer. And we're going to yearn the answer because, or else we're going to be lost in information overload. I think, this might sound crazy, but in 5 years' time, Tinder might be so good that you sort of have a little Siri might be connected to Tinder, and you're like, hey Siri, what's happening tonight? And the Tinder voice might pop up and say, there's someone down the street that we think you're going to be attracted to, Sean, and she's also attracted to you, and you guys have a lot of things in common, and guess what? She's free tomorrow night, and there's this, we know you both like this indie band, and it's playing, would you like us to buy you tickets? And you have a match. So sort of Tinder would do all the work for you. It's a little scary to think that will happen, but I think it's inevitable.
I'm curious to your thoughts on augmented reality and virtual reality. Do you think those, tools will be part of Tinder in the future?
I think we're early enough that, we're sort of on the cusp of a platform shift, but there is no mainstream acceptable or mainstream socially acceptable device out there that utilizes augmented reality. I think when that happens, again, I think it's inevitable. Given that you're going to have these new signals that didn't exist before, I think you're going to have a tremendous change in user behavior and user experiences, and that will definitely impact dating. I started Tinder because I sort of had this vision that you're in the room and there's someone you want to talk to, but you don't have the courage to walk up to them and say hello. So it becomes this missed opportunity, and Tinder lets you anonymously, send them a wink, and if they also like you, then you can start a conversation. You can imagine how with augmented reality and with Tinder, how that experience can actually happen in the room in real time. So I think the impact is profound as these devices get closer to your senses and to your eyes and to your experience.
I'm curious too how you think people should approach balancing using technology as a tool to facilitate relationships and using them as a communication tool. How do you strike a healthy balance?
It's hard. What's great about Tinder is that it's one of the few apps that actually get you off your phone. So the reward for using Tinder is a meaningful relationship in the real world. And if that happens, I think that enriches your life and makes your life better. But I think, more generally speaking, we're constantly distracted, and that is a problem in society. Like you think about, when you have issues in life, it used to be that we would actually sit with those issues, we'd talk to our friends, we would grow, we would learn from them. Now it's so easy to ignore them because the phone is constantly buzzing and taking our attention somewhere, and sometimes our attention away from our problems. And I think that presents a big social challenge. So I think we have some interesting times ahead, and AI and the better technology gets could theoretically solve that by becoming smarter of when to interrupt us and when to give us valuable information.
And you've spoken a little bit about wanting to tee up Tinder's international expansion and then also its financial model before you shifted into your M&A role now.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about the milestones that Tinder has reached on those fronts? And
we just announced in our last earnings call that Tinder did in 2016 $175 million in revenue. We're doing well this year. Tinder is a very healthy company, and we launched Tinder Plus, which is going incredibly well. It's great because we've been able to make money in a way that not only gives value, is a value add to the people who are purchasing Tinder Plus, but it's a value add to the ecosystem as well. So our philosophy with any revenue product that we create is that it has to be accretive to the person purchasing, but also to the overall ecosystem. And you look at something like Super Like, which is, we give one free Super Like a day. We give it away for free every day, and then you can buy more. But a Super Like is enriching the ecosystem. It's not, Tinder's still a place where everyone has control of who they talk to, and that was sort of like the one big transformation it made to the space. And that's still there, but a Super Like just gives you an added signal to help you make a decision. So there's all these opportunities that we've been able to find to make money while making Tinder better, which is pretty cool, because a lot of other revenue models are dilutive to the user experience, and we stay away from those.
And one thing I thought was really interesting is seeing certain countries where Tinder is seeing a lot of growth, like India, for example. Could you chat a little bit about where you're seeing exciting growth happen and what's fueling it?
So it's so cool because Tinder is so simple that I think it's universal around the globe. We've found that it doesn't matter where you are, you sort of get it, and it solves an innate problem. But there are cultural nuances that require us to change our thinking. For example, in India is a great example. The majority of marriages and relationships happen through family introductions. That's the socially acceptable norm of how you meet. And if you don't meet that way, it's bad. It's frowned upon in society. And so you imagine, we need to take in those cultural nuances and reflect on how our products might be different. Or how our impact on our marketing might be different in those markets. So, we've really been able to think globally, which is, it's hard to do, but it's so rewarding because, when I started this company, we thought of ourselves as a US, Los Angeles-based company. We're living in our own little bubble. And now, in everything we do, we think about the global context first. So now we're a global first company, which is a transition that took a while, but is awesome to see.
And one of the tools that really helps people sign up for Tinder is Facebook login, and it's not really available or widely used in every country. What are some of the other factors that can make international expansion challenging?
Yeah. Well, we are addressing the limitation of Facebook internationally. And we're going to launch different ways to log into the app. The most basic being your cell phone number. So I think if you sort of think of it as a funnel, there's a lot of people at the top of the funnel who can't even get into the door, and we need to fix that. But it's little things that we got to do better and are doing better at, which is even localization, language localization. It's something that you think very simple services can solve, but when you really want to convey a marketing message, conveying it with accuracy, using language that is sort of socially relevant, makes a difference. And people can feel. I always say to my team that we've succeeded by building a global company when it doesn't matter what country you're in, you feel like Tinder was founded in that country. Mm-hmm. If you think like Tinder's headquartered in your country, then we've done a good job. But then there's broader feature sets and innovations that I think are relevant in certain markets that aren't in others. For example, in Korea, group dating is a very big thing. It's socially acceptable. And you might imagine how a group dating product might succeed there, whereas it wouldn't succeed in other markets. Or India has its nuances. So every market sort of has its cultural nuances that we can react to and optimize for.
Mm-hmm. And among many users, Tinder still has somewhat of a reputation for being a hookup app compared to other dating apps. And I know that you've referenced studies that have shown that actually more than 80% of users or so actually go into Tinder looking for more than that. Mm-hmm. How have you managed that kind of reputation moving forward? Has it affected how you've approached expansion internationally?
Yeah, we look at ourselves as an introductions company. Our mission is to make it extremely easy and fun to meet someone new. And we don't judge what happens after the introduction. I mean, we've created, as you said, 20 billion introductions, and many of those have resulted in marriages. Many of those have resulted in friendships, in dates, in hookups. But it's no different than meeting someone in a restaurant or through a friend. You might end up depending on where you are in your life and what you want, you might end up hooking up or you might end up getting married. So, we don't think about it in context of what happens after someone meets, because that's their business. We think of it as in context to, can we reduce the work you have to do to meet someone new? And then can we reduce the work that you have to do to get to know that person? And if we can do that, then I think people themselves can figure out the rest. It's funny, because if you think about over centuries, how we meet has really evolved. And every time it evolves, it's very controversial. Like, you go back to 18th century France, and if you liked someone, you would give them a card that was essentially your resume. It was almost like an early form of Tinder. And if they liked you, they would give a card back. And then that evolved to it being socially acceptable for family to make introductions. Then when formal education became bigender, then it was you would meet your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife through school, and it evolves. Then it became clubs and bars and Tinder and online dating. And I hope the next evolution will be led by us.
I'm curious too, when you look for investments and potential startups to acquire, Tinder recently acquired Wheel. You invested in a networking social app for women called Vina. What are you looking for right now?
I think the number one thing at any stage of the business is people. A lot of people say that as you scale, people become less relevant. I disagree. I think at every stage of the business, the leadership is critical, and amongst one of the most critical things that I look for is empathy for your users. Empathy, period. If you are making it your business to seek the quantitative and qualitative data and constantly questioning everything you're doing, then that's a team I like to work with. The second thing is thinking through the market. Is it a market, are you playing in a market that is ripe for disruption? And the third thing is, do you have a product or that is a monopoly in its space within that market? Like, are you doing something that no one else can come close to? And do you have some sort of competitive advantage or barrier to being the best at that thing? So those are sort of the elements that I look for, and at any stage of a business, I think that's always relevant.
Mm-hmm. Since 2012, Tinder has grown from a handful of people to now 200 or so employees, and you have an office headquartered in LA, also have a Palo Alto office now.
Sure.
As you've grown, how have you approached building a culture that you think serves employees?
Yeah, it's so hard as you scale, because everything's easier when it's like 5 people around a table. Decisions are quick. I mean, you literally can get 100% of the company bought in every decision when it's 5 people around a table. As you scale, I think the important thing is to continuously communicate your values. That's what I focus on. I focus on values more than process, because when you focus on values, people can essentially figure out the rest on their own. But also, I think the most important thing is fostering an environment where everyone feels heard. And that means investing in a culture where you're constantly promoting people to speak up. You're using tools that allow you to capture feedback at scale. So to me, I've always been a big believer that ideas come from everywhere, and great leaders are listeners. They're great listeners. So we focused a lot on, and it's harder to do when you have 2 offices and employees all over the world, on making sure that everyone's feedback can come to the surface and be heard through the relevant person who's making a decision.
And today I think something that's on the minds of a lot of people in Silicon Valley is Uber's investigation into sexual harassment and discrimination claims.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on how the company is responding to the claims, and what do you think about harassment and discrimination as issues more broadly in tech?
I don't want to comment on Uber because I don't know the facts. I know they're investigating, and I look forward to hearing the results of that investigation. But I mean, regardless of what the facts are, I think we all can do better. There's no question about that. Equality, gender equality, diversity needs to be a priority at every company. And it's not just because you want to meet some gender quota or you want to look cool. I think which it's become that a little bit these days. I think it's great companies are diverse at its core because the success of your business depends on it. The success of society also depends on it. But if you think about like the greatest ideas at Tinder have come from all over the company, from different people at different ranks. And I think you need to promote diversity and make it a point to actually, again, like I said, listen to all voices. If you don't do that, you're not going to evolve and continuously change and be relevant as a company. So I think, again, diversity is critical to society. It's also critical to the success of these businesses. So, but again, it doesn't matter how well you're doing. I think there's always more that we can do.
And from when you first started out until the past 5 years, what are some practices around building diversity and inclusion that have been working for your company?
Yeah, this is a small thing, but when we have all hands, and it's a big crowd when we do our all hands, but we still to this day, and a big thing in our culture is we would have everyone present a product at the different stages of its life cycle. And we would open it up to the audience to rip it apart. And I would sort of personally poke and push people to speak up. You can sort of see it on their faces, they have something to say. And I think once you publicly show that it's okay to actually speak your mind, and doesn't matter who you are, and that even as a CEO, if someone says something harsh or difficult that you're willing to hear, I think that sets an example. So I think it's a small thing, but there's a lot of things, and like I said, you have to talk about it, you have to promote it, you have to set an example. We've had many discussions that we've just held internally on diversity, and we constantly have different team members that are extraordinarily passionate about how we can make the place more diverse, and they surface their ideas, and they form little committees and come up with ideas that they bring to me or Greg, and we're always listening.
There are many entrepreneurs and founders in the room today. It would be great to hear some of your kind of greatest lessons learned or pieces of advice from first setting out and finding co-founders to work with to now managing a company with more than 100 million in revenue.
I think it's funny because I feel like there's a lot of pressure for people to change the world. And every company has to change the world. And people feel that if they don't have a company that can, every entrepreneur feels like they don't have a company that can change the world, then it's worthless. Because I think a lot of startups that have changed the world have been sensationalized. The founders have been sensationalized. The problem with that is there's so much pressure, right? And if you have all that pressure, ironically, I don't think you will change the world. I mean, I think back to starting Tinder, and I'm friends with a lot of people who've started great companies. And when you hear their stories, in the moment, their goal wasn't to change the world. Their goal was to build something that they were passionate about. It just so happened that as they peeled it back, they found a foundational problem that was world-changing, but they did that through iteration and through following something they're passionate about. So I think, the biggest thing I say to people, don't worry about how big it is. Don't worry about how famous it'll make you. Worry about focusing on something that you love, because I promise it gets so hard. I mean, the faster you grow, the harder it gets. And I know this is cliche, but if you don't love what you do, you won't survive. I mean, there have been moments when I've wanted to crawl into the corner until a ball and cry. Things get so hard, but I've fought through because I had a great team, and we were all bounded by great vision, and we were passionate about what we were doing. So you fight through those moments. But if you don't have that at the core of what you're doing, you won't think about it in the shower. You won't think about it every day, and you won't fight through, and you won't have that great idea, and you won't realize the learnings that are in front of you because you're not looking for them.
And it looks like we just have a little over a minute left, but I'm wondering too, what you see as one of the best decisions that you made early on that has helped the company, sustain the company and into business.
Great question. I think, honestly, it is, we looked for creativity in like the most contrarian and weird places. Like we weren't really focused on following the pack. We were focused on following our users. So we really, day one, and we still do, we had a discipline of listening. Sure, we had great vision for Tinder, great ideas of where it goes, but like when you actually seek that feedback and listen to users and interpret what they're saying, it takes you into places you never expected. And I think it's very inherent in how we grew. I mean, we didn't grow through a viral hack. We grew through like a human hack, which is we actually delivered value and we got out there and pound the pavements and pound the streets in every market around the globe, and went to the right groups and seeded the idea of Tinder. So I think promoting that type of thinking, which is sometimes expensive and doesn't, it's not popular because it doesn't scale to have a team spread across the world pounding the pavement. By allowing those ideas and those experiments to surface, I think it made us who we are.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.